Roommate from hell thought I was having an emotional affair with her boyfriend because we watched Netflix together. She stalked his social media, went through his phone, and made me homeless over her own insecurities until the truth finally came out. I, 22F, have been living with my roommate Jessica, 21F, for about 8 months now. We found each other through a Facebook housing group when we both needed somewhere to live near campus. At first, things went really well between us. We had similar schedules, kept the apartment clean, and even hung out together sometimes on weekends. Jessica has been dating her boyfriend Connor, 23M, for almost 2 years. He's around our place pretty often, maybe 3 or 4 times a week. He usually comes over after his evening classes and stays until around 10 or 11. I've always been polite to him, made small talk when we crossed paths in the kitchen or living room, that sort of thing. Nothing more than normal roommate behavior with a roommate's boyfriend. The problem started about 6 weeks ago when Jessica got a part-time job at a local restaurant. She works Tuesday through Saturday evenings, which means she's gone from about 4 in the afternoon until close to midnight. Her new schedule coincided with Connor still coming over at his usual times. Since Jessica wasn't home, he'd hang around waiting for her to get back from work. The first few times this happened, I tried to give him space. I'd stay in my room or go to the library to study. But after about a week of this routine, Connor started knocking on my door asking if I wanted to watch something on Netflix or if I had any snacks he could have. I didn't think much of it. We were both just sitting around doing nothing, and it seemed normal enough to watch a movie together while waiting for Jessica. This became our regular routine on the nights Jessica worked. Connor would show up around 6, we'd order takeout or I'd make something for dinner, and we'd watch whatever was on Netflix or play video games. We talked about school, his major in engineering, my classes in psychology, normal stuff. Nothing inappropriate ever happened. We never sat particularly close to each other, never touched beyond maybe a high five when one of us won a game, never talked about anything personal or romantic. About 3 weeks into this routine, Jessica started making comments. She'd come home from work and find us watching TV, and she'd make jokes about how we looked like a couple sitting there together. At first, I thought she was just teasing, but the comments kept coming. She started asking me detailed questions about what Connor and I talked about when she wasn't home. She wanted to know if he ever mentioned her, if he seemed distracted or distant, if he acted differently when it was just the two of us. I tried to reassure her that nothing was going on. I told her we mostly just watched mindless shows and talked about homework. But Jessica's questions became more frequent and more pointed. She started timing how long Connor stayed after she got home from work. She'd count the number of empty takeout containers to see if Connor and I had eaten dinner together. She even asked me once if Connor had ever tried to hold my hand or sit closer to me on the couch. The situation got worse 2 weeks ago when Jessica came home early from work one night because the restaurant was slow. She walked in to find Connor and me playing a card game at the kitchen table. We were in the middle of a game of gin rummy that had been going on for about an hour. When Jessica saw us, she didn't say hello or ask why she was home early. Instead, she stood in the doorway staring at us for what felt like a full minute. Connor got up immediately and went to hug her, but Jessica stepped back. She asked him why he was playing cards with me instead of doing homework or watching for her to come home. Connor tried to explain that we were just passing time, but Jessica cut him off. She said she needed to talk to him privately and they went into her room. I could hear them talking in low voices for about 20 minutes before Connor left without saying goodbye to either of us. The next morning, Jessica confronted me while I was making coffee. She asked me point blank if I had feelings for Connor. I told her absolutely not, that I saw him as nothing more than her boyfriend who happened to be around sometimes. She said she didn't believe me because I was always finding excuses to spend time with him when she wasn't home. I pointed out that Connor was the one who knocked on my door and suggested hanging out, not the other way around, but Jessica said that didn't matter because I could have said no. Jessica then told me she thought I was being inappropriate with her boyfriend. She said normal roommates don't hang out with their roommate's boyfriend when the roommate isn't home. She said it looked bad and made her uncomfortable, and she wanted it to stop immediately. I agreed to keep my distance from Connor, even though I didn't think I'd done anything wrong. For the next week, I made sure to stay in my room whenever Connor came over. If I needed something from the kitchen or living room, I'd wait until I heard Jessica come home before leaving my room. But this created new problems. Jessica started complaining that I was being rude to Connor by ignoring him completely. She said he'd mentioned to her that I seemed to be avoiding him, and she wondered if there was some kind of drama between us that she didn't know about. I tried to explain that I was just doing what she'd asked me to do by staying away from Connor, but Jessica said I was being too obvious about it. She wanted me to be polite but not friendly, present but not available, normal but not too normal. I couldn't figure out what she actually wanted from me. Last week, things came to a head when Connor texted me directly. He sent me a message asking if I was okay because I seemed to be avoiding him. He said he hoped he hadn't done something to offend me and that he missed our conversations. I showed the text to Jessica immediately because I didn't want her to think I was hiding communication with Connor from her. Instead of being glad that I'd shown her the message, Jessica got upset that Connor had texted me at all. She said it proved that he was thinking about me when she wasn't around, and that our previous hangouts had meant more to him than just casual friendship. She demanded to see our entire text conversation history, which consisted of maybe 5 messages total over the past few months, all about practical things like whether I knew when Jessica would be home or if I'd seen his textbook that he'd left in the living room. Jessica spent that evening going through every message between Connor and me, analyzing each word. She decided that when Connor had texted me asking if I knew Jessica's work schedule, it meant he was trying to plan time alone with me. When he'd asked about his textbook, she said it was an excuse to start a conversation. She found hidden meanings in completely normal exchanges. After going through our messages, Jessica told me she'd been talking to her friends about the situation, and they all agreed that Connor and I were having an emotional affair. She said even though nothing physical had happened, the fact that we'd spent so much time together and enjoyed each other's company meant we'd crossed a line. She said her friends told her that roommates should never hang out one-on-one with their roommate's boyfriend under any circumstances. I tried to point out that Connor was the one who'd initiated our hangouts, and that I'd agreed to stop spending time with him the moment she'd asked me to. But Jessica said it didn't matter who started it because I should have known better. She said any woman would understand that spending time alone with someone else's boyfriend was inappropriate, regardless of the circumstances. The final straw came 3 days ago when Jessica accused me of dressing differently when Connor was coming over. She said she'd noticed that I put on makeup and wore nicer clothes on the nights she worked. I explained that I'd started a study group that met twice a week at the library, which happened to be on 2 of the nights she worked, and that's why I was more dressed up than usual. But Jessica said the timing was too convenient to be a coincidence. Jessica then told me she'd been documenting everything I did on the nights Connor came over. She had a list of what I wore, how long Connor and I spent in the common areas together, and what we ate for dinner. She'd been taking notes on our interactions for weeks without telling me. She showed me pages of observations written in a notebook, complete with dates and times. Looking at her notes felt invasive and weird. She'd written things like Maya wore her blue sweater that shows her figure and Connor laughed at Maya's joke about her professor for 30 seconds. She'd recorded how many times Connor and I made eye contact during conversations she'd witnessed, and whether she thought the eye contact lasted too long. Yesterday, Jessica announced that she'd given Connor an ultimatum. She told him he was no longer allowed to come over when she wasn't home, and if he needed to wait for her after work, he had to wait in his car or at the library. She also told him he wasn't allowed to text me anymore, even about practical roommate things. If he needed to communicate something to me, he had to go through her. Connor apparently didn't take this well. Jessica said he argued with her about the new rules, which she interpreted as proof that he actually did have feelings for me. She said if Connor really cared only about her, he wouldn't mind not being able to hang out with me anymore. The fact that he protested meant he was attached to me in an inappropriate way. Now Jessica wants me to move out. She said she can't trust me around her boyfriend, and that even with the new rules in place, she'll always wonder what's happening when she's not home. She's giving me until the end of next month to find a new place to live. She said she's already talked to a friend who wants to take over my part of the lease. I don't know what to do. I genuinely never had romantic feelings for Connor, and I don't believe he had feelings for me either. We were just 2 people hanging out because we were both bored and in the same place at the same time. I thought I was being a good roommate by keeping her boyfriend company when she couldn't be there. Now I'm being kicked out of my apartment because Jessica has convinced herself that Connor and I were having some kind of affair. Finding a new place to live in the middle of the semester is going to be really difficult and expensive. Most people already have their living situations figured out, and the few places available are either way out of my budget or in inconvenient locations far from campus. I'm also worried about losing my security deposit since I'll be breaking the lease early, even though Jessica's friend is willing to take over. I keep going back over everything that happened, trying to figure out if I actually did something wrong or if Jessica's accusations are completely unfounded. I can't think of a single moment when Connor and I crossed any kind of line, but Jessica is so convinced that something inappropriate happened that she's willing to blow up our living situation over it. Has anyone else been in a situation like this? Am I missing something obvious that would explain why Jessica is so suspicious? Or is she being unreasonable about a completely innocent friendship between her boyfriend and her roommate? Update 1: I wanted to update everyone on what happened after my original post. A lot of you told me that Jessica was being unreasonable and that I hadn't done anything wrong. Some people suggested that Jessica might be insecure about her relationship with Connor for other reasons. Unfortunately, things got much worse before I figured out what was really going on. After I posted originally, I decided to try talking to Jessica one more time before looking for a new apartment. I asked her if we could sit down and work through the situation because I didn't want to move out over what I still believed was a misunderstanding. Jessica agreed to talk, but she brought up the notebook again and started reading from her observations about Connor and me. She'd written down things that I didn't even remember doing. According to her notes, I'd allegedly complimented Connor's shirt on 3 separate occasions, laughed at his jokes 47 times in one evening, and asked him personal questions about his family and childhood. When I told her I didn't remember most of these interactions the way she described them, she said that proved I was being flirtatious without even realizing it. Jessica also revealed that she'd been asking Connor detailed questions about our time together when she wasn't home. She'd quiz him about what we talked about, what we watched on TV, and how I acted around him. According to Jessica, Connor's answers kept changing, which made her more suspicious that something inappropriate was happening between us. I pointed out that Connor's answers probably changed because he wasn't paying close attention to our casual hangouts, not because he was hiding something. If someone asked me to recall exactly what I'd talked about with someone 3 days ago, I probably couldn't give the same answer twice either. But Jessica interpreted his inconsistent responses as evidence that he was lying to cover up his feelings for me. During our conversation, Jessica admitted that she'd also been going through Connor's phone when he left it unattended. She'd read through our text messages multiple times, looking for hidden meanings or deleted conversations. She'd also checked his social media to see if he'd liked or commented on any of my posts. When she found that he'd liked a few of my Instagram photos over the past several months, she said it confirmed that he was paying too much attention to me online. I tried to explain that liking someone's social media posts was normal behavior that didn't indicate romantic interest, especially when that person was his girlfriend's roommate who he saw regularly. But Jessica said she'd asked her friends, and they all agreed that boyfriends shouldn't be liking other women's photos, even if those women were friends or acquaintances. The conversation ended with Jessica saying she still wanted me to move out, but she was willing to give me an extra 2 weeks to find a place since I'd been cooperative about discussing the situation. She also said she appreciated that I'd been staying in my room when Connor came over, even though she still didn't trust me around him. Over the next week, I started looking at apartments and reaching out to people who might need a roommate. The process was just as difficult as I'd expected. Most places were either too expensive for my budget or required a longer lease than I wanted to commit to mid-semester. I found a few possibilities, but they all had significant drawbacks like being far from campus or having roommates who seemed problematic in different ways. During this week, Connor started texting me again despite Jessica's rule about not communicating with me directly. His messages weren't flirtatious or inappropriate. He mostly asked if I was really moving out and said he was sorry that Jessica's concerns about our friendship had gotten so out of hand. He said he'd tried to convince Jessica that nothing romantic had ever happened between us but that she wouldn't believe him. I didn't respond to most of Connor's texts because I didn't want to give Jessica more ammunition against me. But when he sent me a message saying he felt bad that I was having to move because of a situation he'd helped create, I replied briefly to tell him it wasn't his fault and that I understood Jessica's perspective even if I disagreed with it. 2 weeks after our conversation, Jessica announced that she'd changed her mind about giving me extra time to move out. She said Connor had confessed to her that he'd been texting me again, and she interpreted this as proof that he couldn't stay away from me even when she'd explicitly asked him not to contact me. She wanted me out by the original deadline she'd given me. I asked Jessica if she'd told Connor not to text me or if she'd just told me that he wasn't supposed to text me. It turned out that Jessica had never actually told Connor about the no-contact rule. She'd told me that Connor wasn't allowed to text me anymore, but she'd never communicated this boundary to Connor himself. When I pointed this out, Jessica said it didn't matter because Connor should have known that texting me was inappropriate. At this point, I was getting really frustrated with Jessica's constantly changing rules and expectations. I told her that if she wanted Connor to stop texting me, she needed to tell him directly instead of expecting me to enforce boundaries that he didn't know existed. Jessica got upset and said I was being difficult and trying to find loopholes in her reasonable requests. The situation escalated 2 days later when Jessica accused me of deliberately sabotaging her relationship with Connor. She said that ever since she'd asked me to keep my distance from him, Connor had been acting different toward her. He was less affectionate, spent less time at our apartment, and seemed distracted when they were together. Jessica believed that I'd said something to Connor to turn him against her. I told Jessica that I'd barely spoken to Connor in weeks and certainly hadn't said anything negative about her or their relationship. But Jessica said Connor's changed behavior was too much of a coincidence to be unrelated to the conflict between her and me. She demanded to know what I'd said to Connor to make him pull away from her. This conversation revealed something I hadn't known before. According to Jessica, Connor had been questioning whether their relationship was healthy. He'd apparently told her that he thought she was being too controlling about his interactions with other people, including me. He'd also said that he didn't like how much time Jessica spent analyzing and documenting his behavior. Jessica interpreted Connor's concerns about their relationship as evidence that I'd been manipulating him against her. She said that before Connor and I started hanging out regularly, he'd never complained about her behavior or questioned their relationship dynamics. She believed that I'd planted seeds of doubt in Connor's mind about whether Jessica was a good girlfriend. I tried to point out that Connor might be having doubts about their relationship because of Jessica's recent behavior, not because of anything I'd said. The constant accusations, the phone checking, the documentation of his interactions with me, and the restrictions on his communication might naturally make someone question whether their partner trusted them. But Jessica said I was just trying to deflect blame for ruining her relationship. The final blow came when Jessica told me that Connor had broken up with her the night before. According to Jessica, Connor said he felt like Jessica didn't trust him and that her suspicions about his friendship with me had made him realize they had bigger problems in their relationship. He told her that even if I moved out and they never saw me again, he didn't think he could continue dating someone who would go through his phone and keep detailed notes about his interactions with other people. Jessica was convinced that Connor's decision to break up with her was entirely my fault. She said that if I'd never moved in with her, Connor never would have gotten to know me, and their relationship would still be fine. She said I destroyed her relationship by being too friendly with her boyfriend and then by making Connor think she was crazy for being concerned about our friendship. Now Jessica wants me out immediately. She doesn't want to wait for the end of the month anymore. She's giving me 1 week to find somewhere else to live, and she's threatening to have the landlord evict me if I don't leave voluntarily. She's also demanding that I pay an extra month's rent as compensation for the damage I've allegedly caused to her relationship. I don't have anywhere to go on such short notice, and I definitely don't have the money to pay Jessica extra rent on top of a security deposit for a new place. I've been staying at the library until late every night to avoid being in the apartment with Jessica, but I can't keep that up indefinitely. The worst part is that I'm starting to doubt myself. Jessica is so convinced that I'm responsible for her breakup with Connor that I'm wondering if I really did something wrong without realizing it. Maybe I was too friendly with Connor, or maybe I should have refused to hang out with him even when he asked. I keep replaying our interactions in my head, trying to figure out if there were moments when I crossed a line that I didn't see at the time. I reached out to a few friends for advice, but most of them don't know Connor or Jessica well enough to have an opinion about what happened. The friends who have met Connor said they never got the impression that he had feelings for me, but they also said they can understand why Jessica might have been uncomfortable with Connor and me spending so much time together without her. I'm not sure what to do next. I need to find a place to live immediately, but I also feel like there's more to this story that I'm not understanding. Jessica's reaction seems extreme even for someone who was genuinely concerned about her boyfriend's friendship with another woman. But I can't figure out what I might be missing. Update 2: I need to share what I discovered after my last update because it completely changed my understanding of everything that happened with Jessica and Connor. The truth was much more complicated than I originally thought, and I found out that I was only seeing a small part of what was really going on. After Jessica gave me 1 week to move out, I ended up crashing with a friend from my psychology program while I frantically looked for a permanent place to live. My friend Sarah had a studio apartment, so I was sleeping on her couch, but she was willing to let me stay there temporarily since I was obviously in a difficult situation. While I was staying with Sarah, she mentioned that she'd actually met Connor before at a party earlier in the semester. She said he'd seemed nice enough, but she remembered thinking it was weird that he'd spent most of the party complaining about his girlfriend. According to Sarah, Connor had told several people at the party that Jessica was possessive and paranoid, and that she constantly accused him of flirting with other women. This was the first time I'd heard that Connor and Jessica had been having problems before I ever started hanging out with him. Jessica had always made it seem like their relationship was perfect until Connor and I began spending time together. But according to Sarah, Connor had been unhappy with Jessica's behavior for months. Sarah's information made me realize that I might have been a convenient scapegoat for problems that already existed in Connor and Jessica's relationship. Maybe Jessica's suspicions about Connor and me weren't really about our friendship at all, but about her own insecurities that had been building up over time. I decided to reach out to Connor to get his perspective on what had happened. I knew Jessica wouldn't like me contacting him, but since she'd already kicked me out and they'd broken up, I figured it didn't matter anymore. I sent Connor a text asking if he'd be willing to meet for coffee so we could talk about the situation. Connor agreed to meet me, and when we sat down together, he immediately apologized for the role he'd played in my having to move out. He said he felt terrible that Jessica's suspicions about our friendship had resulted in me losing my housing situation. But then he told me things about his relationship with Jessica that I'd never known. According to Connor, Jessica had been accusing him of flirting with other women since almost the beginning of their relationship. Before me, she'd been suspicious of his female classmates, his co-workers at his part-time job, and even his female professors. She'd gone through his phone multiple times over the past year, not just recently like I'd thought. She'd also made him stop talking to several female friends because she thought they were interested in him romantically. Connor said that when he started hanging out with me while waiting for Jessica to get home from work, he was honestly just grateful to have a normal conversation with a woman without it turning into a big drama with Jessica. He said he'd initially planned to tell Jessica about our hangouts, but when she started making comments about us looking like a couple, he realized she was already suspicious and decided it was easier to just not bring it up. The part that really surprised me was when Connor told me that Jessica had been checking up on him in ways I'd never known about. She'd created fake social media accounts to follow his female friends and see if he was interacting with them online. She'd also started showing up at his workplace unexpectedly to see if he was talking to female customers or coworkers. Connor said Jessica's behavior had been escalating for months, but he'd been trying to manage it by avoiding situations that might trigger her jealousy. Connor also revealed that the notebook Jessica kept about my interactions with him wasn't the first time she'd documented his behavior. She'd previously kept similar notes about his interactions with other women, including detailed descriptions of conversations she'd overheard and observations about body language and eye contact. Connor said he'd found these notebooks by accident a few months earlier, but when he'd confronted Jessica about them, she'd convinced him that keeping track of his interactions with other women was a normal thing for girlfriends to do. The most disturbing thing Connor told me was that Jessica had been lying to him about conversations she'd had with me. Jessica had told Connor that I'd made several comments about thinking he was attractive and that I'd asked her personal questions about their relationship and their physical intimacy. According to Jessica, I'd also supposedly told her that I thought Connor and I had more in common than he and Jessica did. I never said any of those things to Jessica. In fact, I'd barely talked to Jessica about Connor at all except when she'd directly asked me questions about our hangouts. I'd certainly never made comments about finding him attractive or compared him to Jessica in any way. But Connor had been hearing for weeks that I'd been making inappropriate comments about him behind his back. Connor said that Jessica's claims about what I'd allegedly said had made him uncomfortable about our friendship, but he'd also been confused because my behavior toward him never matched what Jessica was telling him I'd said about him. He said he'd started to wonder if Jessica was exaggerating or misinterpreting innocent comments I'd made, but he hadn't wanted to accuse her of lying without proof. The final piece of the puzzle came when Connor showed me some text messages he'd received from Jessica after their breakup. In these messages, Jessica admitted that she'd been making up some of the things she'd told Connor about me. She said she'd been so worried about losing him to another woman that she'd felt justified in exaggerating the threat I posed to their relationship. In one message, Jessica wrote that she knew Connor and I probably weren't actually having an affair, but that she'd been afraid we might develop feelings for each other if we kept spending time together. She said she'd decided it was better to end our friendship before anything real happened between us, even if it meant stretching the truth about what she'd observed. Jessica also admitted in her text to Connor that she'd been dealing with anxiety about their relationship for months, but instead of talking to Connor about her insecurities, she decided to try to control his interactions with other women. She said she'd thought that if she could just eliminate the sources of her anxiety, their relationship would improve. Reading Jessica's messages made me realize that I'd been completely manipulated. Jessica had created a crisis in our living situation based on lies and exaggerations, and she'd convinced both Connor and me that we were partially responsible for problems that existed entirely in her own mind. She'd made Connor think I'd been flirting with him behind her back, and she'd made me think I'd been inappropriate without realizing it. Connor and I talked for almost 3 hours that day, comparing notes about what Jessica had told each of us and trying to piece together what had actually happened versus what Jessica had claimed was happening. By the end of our conversation, we'd figured out that almost everything Jessica had said about our interactions had been either exaggerated or completely fabricated. The irony was that Connor and I actually did get to know each other pretty well during that conversation, probably better than we'd ever gotten to know each other during all those evenings watching TV at the apartment. We discovered that we had similar senses of humor and similar perspectives on a lot of things. Under different circumstances, we might have become genuine friends. But we also both agreed that pursuing any kind of relationship, even a friendship, would be complicated given everything that had happened with Jessica. Connor said he was planning to focus on his studies and avoid dating for a while until he could process what he'd learned about Jessica's behavior. I was still dealing with the stress of finding permanent housing and didn't need additional drama in my life. After meeting with Connor, I considered confronting Jessica about the lies she'd told both of us. But I realized that there wasn't much point in having that conversation. Jessica had already shown that she was willing to manipulate situations to get what she wanted, and I didn't think confronting her would lead to any kind of meaningful resolution. Instead, I decided to focus on moving forward with my life. I'd found a small one-bedroom apartment that I could afford on my own, and I was scheduled to move in the following week. The apartment was further from campus than I would have preferred, but it was clean and safe, and I wouldn't have to deal with roommate drama anymore. I did end up losing my security deposit from the apartment I'd shared with Jessica, as I'd expected. Jessica claimed that I'd broken the lease by moving out early, even though she'd been the one who'd demanded that I leave. I could have fought her on it, but I decided it wasn't worth the additional stress and conflict. The whole experience taught me a lot about how people can manipulate situations by controlling the information that different parties have access to. Jessica had been able to create conflict between Connor and me by telling each of us different things about what the other person had said or done. Neither of us had thought to compare notes until after the damage was already done. I also learned that sometimes people create drama in their relationships as a way of avoiding dealing with their own underlying issues. Jessica's real problem wasn't that Connor was flirting with other women, but that she had anxiety and trust issues that she wasn't addressing directly. Instead of working on those issues, she tried to control Connor's behavior to manage her own emotions. The situation with Jessica and Connor ended up being a valuable learning experience for me, even though it was stressful and expensive at the time. I'm more aware now of red flags in relationships and living situations, and I'm better at setting boundaries when people try to involve me in their personal drama. Update 3: I wanted to post one final update to close out this whole situation with Jessica and Connor. A lot has happened over the past few months, and I think people who followed my story deserve to know how everything turned out in the end. First, the practical stuff worked out better than I expected. The one-bedroom apartment I moved into turned out to be perfect for me. It's smaller than what I had with Jessica, but I love having my own space without having to worry about roommate drama. The commute to campus is longer, but I actually enjoy the walk most days, and it gives me time to listen to podcasts or just think. I never got my security deposit back from Jessica, despite sending her several polite messages asking about it. She kept saying she was waiting for the landlord to assess any damages to the apartment, but I'm pretty sure she just kept the money. I decided it wasn't worth pursuing legally since it would have cost more in time and stress than the actual amount of money involved. About 6 weeks after I moved out, I ran into Jessica at the grocery store near campus. She acted like nothing had ever happened between us and tried to make small talk about my new apartment and how my classes were going. When I gave her short, polite answers, she asked if I wanted to get coffee sometime to catch up properly. I told Jessica that I didn't think getting coffee was a good idea given everything that had happened between us. She seemed genuinely surprised by my response and said she hoped I wasn't still upset about the misunderstanding with Connor. She called it a misunderstanding, like the whole situation had been some kind of innocent mix-up rather than her deliberately lying and manipulating both Connor and me. I didn't see any point in rehashing the details of what had happened, so I just told Jessica that I preferred to keep our interactions minimal and polite if we ran into each other around campus. She looked hurt by this, but she accepted it without arguing. Connor and I stayed in touch occasionally over the following months, but we kept our communication pretty limited. We'd text each other maybe once every few weeks, usually about something school-related or to share a funny meme that reminded one of us of a conversation we'd had. We never hung out in person again after that coffee meeting where we'd compared notes about Jessica's behavior. I think both Connor and I understood that while we might have been friends under normal circumstances, our relationship would always be complicated by the history with Jessica. It wasn't worth the potential drama, especially since we were both trying to move forward from that whole situation. In March, Connor texted me to let me know that Jessica had been contacting him again. She'd been sending him messages apologizing for her behavior during their relationship and asking if they could meet to talk about getting back together. Connor said he'd been ignoring most of her messages, but Jessica had started showing up at places where she knew he'd be, like the library and the campus coffee shop where he liked to study. Connor asked if Jessica had been contacting me too, but she hadn't. I told Connor that he should probably be direct with Jessica about not wanting to reconcile rather than just ignoring her messages, since ignoring someone can sometimes make them more persistent. Connor said he'd already told Jessica several times that he wasn't interested in getting back together, but she kept insisting that they could work through their problems if he'd just give her another chance. A few weeks later, Connor updated me that Jessica's attempts to contact him had escalated. She'd started following him around campus and showing up at his apartment building. She'd also been asking mutual friends for information about his schedule and whether he was dating anyone new. Connor said he was considering talking to campus security about Jessica's behavior because it was starting to interfere with his daily routine. I suggested that Connor document Jessica's attempts to contact him in case he needed to file a formal complaint. I also recommended that he tell Jessica's friends what was happening, since they might be unknowingly helping her by providing information about his whereabouts. Around this same time, I heard through mutual acquaintances that Jessica had been telling people her own version of what had happened between the three of us. According to Jessica's version, Connor and I had been having an emotional affair that eventually turned physical, and she'd been the victim of our deception. She was apparently telling people that she tried to be understanding about Connor's friendship with me, but that we'd taken advantage of her trust. Jessica's version of events was completely false, but I realized that there wasn't much I could do to correct the record without getting drawn back into drama that I'd been trying to avoid. I decided to focus on my own life and let people think whatever they wanted to think about a situation they hadn't actually witnessed. The rumors Jessica was spreading didn't affect me much since most of my close friends knew the real story, and I didn't care what acquaintances or strangers thought about my personal life. But I did feel bad that Connor was dealing with people questioning his character based on Jessica's lies. In April, the situation with Jessica came to a head when she tried to force a confrontation with Connor outside his apartment building. According to Connor, Jessica had been waiting by his car when he came home from class, and she demanded that he explain why he was refusing to work on their relationship. When Connor tried to walk away from the conversation, Jessica had grabbed his arm and refused to let him leave. Connor ended up calling campus security, and Jessica was given a formal warning about harassment. The security officer apparently told Jessica that any further attempts to contact Connor without his consent would result in more serious consequences. Connor said that Jessica had seemed shocked that he'd involved campus authorities, like she genuinely hadn't realized that her behavior had crossed a line. Since the incident with campus security, Jessica hasn't contacted Connor or shown up anywhere he's likely to be. Connor thinks she finally understood that he was serious about not wanting to reconcile and that continuing to pursue him would only get her in more trouble. I haven't had any direct contact with Jessica since our brief encounter at the grocery store, but I heard from a mutual friend that Jessica ended up moving back home with her parents for the rest of the semester. Apparently, she'd been struggling academically and emotionally, and her parents thought it would be better for her to take some time away from campus. Looking back on the whole situation, I'm glad that everything worked out the way it did, even though it was stressful and expensive at the time. Living alone has been really good for me, and I've learned a lot about setting boundaries and recognizing manipulative behavior before it gets out of hand. The experience with Jessica taught me to trust my instincts when something doesn't feel right in a relationship or living situation. I've been questioning myself and wondering if I'd done something wrong, but it turned out that my initial assessment was correct and Jessica's accusations were unfounded. I also learned the importance of direct communication rather than trying to manage other people's emotions or avoid conflict. If I ever find myself in a similar situation in the future, I'll be more likely to address problems head-on rather than trying to accommodate unreasonable demands. Connor seems to be doing well now that he's no longer dealing with Jessica's harassment. We still exchange occasional messages, but we've both moved on with our lives. He's been focusing on his engineering coursework and has started dating someone new, according to mutual friends. As for Jessica, I hope she's getting the help she needs to address whatever underlying issues led to her behavior during our time as roommates. Her actions caused real harm to multiple people, but I also recognize that she was probably struggling with anxiety and insecurity that she didn't know how to handle in a healthy way. I don't have any desire to reconnect with Jessica or to try to repair our friendship. Too much happened for us to go back to being normal roommates or friends. But I also don't hold any grudges against her. The whole situation is just part of my past now, and I'm focused on moving forward. For anyone who might find themselves in a similar situation, my advice would be to document everything, talk to trusted friends about what's happening, and don't let someone else's insecurities dictate your behavior if you know you haven't done anything wrong. It's also important to recognize when a living situation or relationship has become unhealthy and to prioritize your own well-being over trying to fix someone else's problems. The past few months have been much more peaceful than the drama-filled period when I was living with Jessica. I'm doing well in my classes, I've made some new friends, and I'm enjoying having control over my own living space. Sometimes difficult situations end up leading to better outcomes than you could have imagined at the time. Now let's move to the next story. Story 2. I found a $3,000 jewelry receipt in my husband's coat. That's how I discovered he had been living a complete double life for 3 years with another woman. I, 32F, have been married to my husband Brock, 35M, for 8 years. We met at our mutual friends Mike and Sarah's wedding, where he was the best man and I was one of the bridesmaids. I remember that day clearly. I was helping Sarah with her dress when Brock walked in looking for Mike. He apologized for interrupting, but ended up staying to chat with us for almost an hour. He was charming, successful, and seemed like the perfect gentleman. There was something about his confident yet kind demeanor that drew me in immediately. After the wedding, we started running into each other more frequently at our friends' gatherings. Brock always made an effort to talk to me, and soon we began dating. He worked as a regional sales manager for a large pharmaceutical company, a job he had held for 5 years before we met. His career was flourishing, and he took pride in his success. We dated for 2 years before getting married in a beautiful ceremony surrounded by our loved ones. The early years of our marriage were wonderful. We bought a lovely home in a nice neighborhood, and 2 years later, we were blessed with twin daughters, Emma and Sophie. Being a pediatrician myself, I took a 3-month maternity leave to care for them. Brock was incredibly supportive during this time, helping with night feeds and diaper changes whenever he was home. His job required frequent travel to different cities in our region. He would be gone 2 to 3 days every week, sometimes longer if there were important meetings or conferences. I never questioned his work schedule because the job paid well and helped us maintain a comfortable lifestyle. Plus, whenever he was home, he was an attentive father. He never missed the girls' dance recitals, school events, or doctor appointments. He would spend weekends playing with them in our backyard, teaching them to ride their bikes, or helping them with their homework. Brock was also thoughtful in our relationship. He remembered anniversaries, planned surprise date nights, and often brought home small gifts from his business trips. The only strain in our marriage was his frequent absence, but I understood it was part of his career. I had my own busy schedule at the pediatric clinic, and between our careers and raising the twins, life was hectic but satisfying. Last month changed everything. I was cleaning our home office, something I rarely did since it was primarily Brock's workspace. While organizing his desk, I found a receipt from Cartier tucked into the pocket of his coat that was hanging on the chair. The receipt was for a diamond necklace worth $3,000, dated just 2 weeks before. I was confused because I hadn't received any jewelry from him recently, and our anniversary wasn't for another 6 months. When Brock came home that evening, I casually asked about the receipt. He seemed startled for a moment but quickly composed himself, saying it was an early birthday gift for his mother. The explanation made little sense. His mother's birthday was 6 months away, and in the 8 years I'd known her, she had never worn expensive jewelry. She was a practical woman who preferred simple accessories from local craft fairs. That night, I couldn't sleep. Something about his reaction bothered me. I kept thinking about small changes in his behavior over the past few months. He had been more protective of his phone, often taking calls in another room, and spending more time in his home office with the door locked. He claimed it was due to confidential work matters, and I had trusted him. While he was sleeping, I went to his office and opened his work laptop. I know accessing someone's private computer isn't right, but my instincts were screaming that something was wrong. His email was already logged in, and what I found made my world collapse. There were hundreds of emails between him and a woman named Kathy, going back 3 years. The emails contained intimate conversations, photos of them together, and detailed plans of their meetups. Kathy lived in Sacramento, one of the cities Brock frequently visited for work. They had been seeing each other during his supposed business trips. As I read through their correspondence, I felt physically sick. Brock had created an entire alternate life in Sacramento. He had rented a luxury apartment there under his name, where they would meet. He went by his middle name, James, and had told everyone, including Kathy, that he was a divorced father from Seattle with shared custody of twin daughters. This explained his weekly absences. He had used his actual work travel to establish a routine that wouldn't raise suspicions with either me or Kathy. The diamond necklace was a birthday gift for her. There were emails discussing how much she would love it. I found pictures of them celebrating Christmas together during a business conference, vacationing in Hawaii when he was supposedly at a sales training, and attending family events with her relatives. He had integrated himself into her life completely, meeting her friends, participating in her family gatherings, and planning a future together. The most devastating discovery came near the end of my search. Recent emails revealed that Kathy was 4 months pregnant with their first child. Brock had been ecstatically planning their future, looking at houses in Sacramento where they could finally live together permanently once his custody arrangement with his ex-wife, me, was sorted out. There were messages about nursery designs, baby names, and plans for their life as parents. I spent the entire night copying every email, photo, and document to my personal drive. I took screenshots of bank statements showing transfers to their joint account and saved copies of the apartment lease. By morning, I had compiled an extensive record of his deception. After Brock left for work, I found Kathy on social media and sent her a message. I introduced myself as Brock's wife and attached our marriage certificate, recent family photos, and pictures of our life together. I explained everything, that Brock wasn't divorced, that he lived with me and our daughters full time, and that their entire relationship was built on lies. Kathy called me within minutes, sobbing uncontrollably. She had no idea Brock was married. In her version of reality, she was building a life with a divorced father who was planning to move in with her once his custody arrangement was finalized. She shared more details about their relationship, weekend trips, family events, plans for their future. She even told me about a Bahamas vacation they had planned for next month, the same week Brock had told me he had an important sales conference in Chicago. That evening, after putting the girls to bed, I confronted Brock. I waited until he was in his office and calmly walked in with my laptop. At first, he tried to deny everything, claiming I was misinterpreting things. But when I showed him the evidence and mentioned my conversation with Kathy, he turned pale. He hadn't expected me to discover his secret life, let alone contact his pregnant girlfriend. He broke down, begging me to understand that he loved me and our daughters more than anything. He claimed he had gotten caught up in something he couldn't control, that Kathy meant nothing to him. When I asked about the pregnancy, he became hysterical, promising to end things with her immediately if I would just give him another chance. I told him to pack his bags and leave. I couldn't stand looking at him anymore, couldn't bear the thought of him sleeping under the same roof as our daughters. Before he left, I informed him that I had already sent all the evidence to both our families. His face crumbled as he realized the carefully constructed facade of his life was completely shattered. Now, 3 weeks later, I'm dealing with the aftermath. Brock's family is pressuring me to forgive him, saying that exposing his affair to everyone was cruel and unnecessary. They argue that I should think about our daughters and try to keep our family together. His mother even suggested that since Kathy is pregnant, we could work something out for the sake of all the children involved. But how can I forgive someone who lived a double life for years? Who was planning to abandon his family for his pregnant mistress? Who lied not just to me, but to everyone around him? Am I wrong for refusing to give him another chance? Update 1: The situation has become even more devastating than I initially thought. After my last post, Kathy reached out to me again. We've been in regular contact, sharing information and trying to make sense of Brock's deception. During one of our conversations, she revealed something that made my entire body go cold. Brock had been using our daughter's college fund to maintain his life with her. When the girls were born, we opened a dedicated savings account for their education. Every month, we both contributed a portion of our salaries to ensure they would have the best opportunities in the future. The account had accumulated nearly $120,000 over the past 6 years. Brock had been named the primary account holder since he claimed to have more experience with financial management. According to Kathy, Brock had withdrawn almost $50,000 from this account over the past year alone. He told me these withdrawals were for promising investment opportunities that would multiply our daughter's college fund. I trusted him completely, never questioning his financial decisions because he had always been good with money. Now I know he used that money to fund his secret life, paying rent for their luxury apartment, buying expensive gifts, and taking Kathy on lavish vacations. After learning this, I immediately went through all our accounts with a fine-tooth comb. What I discovered was horrifying. Brock had been systematically draining our savings for years. He had opened multiple credit cards in my name using forged documents, racking up thousands in debt. He had even taken out a personal loan of $30,000 using my social security number and forged signatures. I discovered that the Bahamas vacation he had planned with Kathy was booked using one of these fraudulent credit cards. The diamond necklace, their weekend getaways, even the furniture in their Sacramento apartment, all paid for with stolen money. Money that was meant for our daughter's future. I've filed a police report for financial fraud and identity theft. My lawyer is working to freeze all joint accounts and recover whatever funds we can. She's also building a case for criminal charges. The evidence is overwhelming. We have bank statements, forged documents, and even emails where Brock discussed using these funds with Kathy, but she believed the money was legitimately his. Yesterday, things got even worse when Brock's mother showed up unannounced at my house. I was already having a rough day, dealing with the girls' questions about their father's absence and trying to schedule appointments with financial advisors. The last thing I needed was her self-righteous intervention. Instead of apologizing for her son's actions or offering support to her granddaughters, she launched into a tirade about how I was to blame for the situation. She claimed that my demanding career as a pediatrician had pushed Brock away. According to her, because I worked long hours and sometimes had emergency calls, I hadn't given him the attention he deserved. She actually suggested that my neglect had forced him to seek comfort elsewhere. But the most outrageous part came when she brought up Kathy's pregnancy. She had the audacity to suggest that since I earned such a good salary, I should help Brock pay child support to Kathy. Her reasoning? If I hadn't been so focused on my career, Brock wouldn't have strayed, and therefore I was partially responsible for the situation. She even implied that my selfishness in exposing the affair might harm Kathy's pregnancy due to stress. I lost my composure completely. I showed her the bank statements proving that I had been the primary breadwinner for years while her precious son stole from his own children to fund his double life. I told her about the fraudulent loans and credit cards. I showed her evidence of how Brock had planned to abandon us for his new family in Sacramento. She left in tears, but not before warning me that I would regret destroying the family and depriving my daughters of their father. Since then, Brock's relatives have been on a smear campaign. They're spreading rumors in our social circle that I was emotionally abusive and controlling throughout our marriage. They claim I tracked Brock's movements, checked his phone regularly, and restricted his access to our money, all of which forced him to seek freedom with Kathy. They're painting his affair as a beautiful love story that I maliciously exposed out of spite and jealousy. Only my immediate family and closest friends know the full truth. They're furious about these accusations, but I've asked them not to engage with the rumors. I want to focus my energy on protecting my daughters and securing our financial future rather than fighting a social media war with Brock's enablers. The hardest part of all this is watching my daughters struggle. Emma and Sophie are only 6, too young to understand the complexity of adult relationships, but old enough to feel the pain of their father's absence. They keep asking when Daddy is coming home, why he doesn't call them anymore, and if he still loves them. Brock hasn't made any effort to see them since I kicked him out. He's too preoccupied with Kathy's pregnancy and trying to damage control his reputation. I'm trying to maintain their routine and provide stability, but some days it feels impossible. Last night, Sophie cried herself to sleep clutching a photo of Brock, and Emma has started having nightmares. The child psychologist says this is normal behavior for their age, but it breaks my heart to see them suffering because of their father's selfishness. I'm documenting everything, the lies, the financial fraud, the attempts at manipulation by his family, for the upcoming divorce proceedings. My lawyer says we have a strong case for full custody given Brock's pattern of deception and financial abuse. But right now, I'm just trying to take things one day at a time, focusing on protecting my daughters and rebuilding what Brock destroyed. Update 2. Just when I thought I had uncovered all of Brock's lies, more shocking information has come to light. Last week, I received an unexpected message from Kathy's cousin, Maria. She had been doing some research after everything happened and discovered something that made my blood run cold. Brock has done this before. Maria works as a legal assistant and has access to various public records databases. She found court documents showing that Brock was previously married in Seattle for 4 years before meeting me. His first wife, Alexandra, had filed for divorce after discovering his affairs with multiple women. The pattern was identical: business trips to different cities, secret relationships, and financial deception. The court records showed that Brock had been ordered to pay substantial restitution to Alexandra for funds he had stolen from their joint accounts. He had used the same tactics: forged documents, unauthorized loans, and hidden credit cards. Just like with our daughter's college fund, he had drained their shared savings to maintain his various relationships. Maria shared old news articles about the divorce from local Seattle papers. Alexandra had tried to warn others about Brock's behavior through social media and local community forums. However, Brock's family hired expensive lawyers who threatened legal action against anyone who shared information about the case. They managed to get most of the posts removed and effectively silenced Alexandra. This revelation explains so much. When we first met, Brock told me he had moved to our city from Seattle for a career opportunity. He never mentioned living there with a wife. His family, who had always portrayed him as the perfect son who had never been in a serious relationship before me, must have known about his first marriage. They helped him hide it and watched silently as he married me under false pretenses. I shared all this information with my lawyer, who says it significantly strengthens our case. The evidence of Brock's pattern of behavior will help with both the divorce proceedings and the criminal charges for financial fraud. We've also discovered more unauthorized transactions. He had been selling my jewelry and expensive gifts for my parents, claiming they were lost or stolen. Through Maria, I was able to contact Alexandra. She was hesitant to talk at first, afraid of potential legal repercussions from Brock's family. But after hearing my story, she opened up about her experience. The similarities are haunting. Brock had used the same lies, the same manipulation tactics, even the same excuses when caught. Alexandra had also dealt with his family blaming her and spreading rumors about her being controlling and unstable. Meanwhile, Kathy has decided to move back to her hometown in Oregon. Her parents own a small business there and have offered to help her raise the baby. She's filing for sole custody and wants nothing to do with Brock anymore. The stress of discovering his true nature has taken a toll on her health, and her doctor advised her to avoid any unnecessary contact with him. Kathy has been incredibly helpful, continuing to provide evidence and documentation to my lawyer. She found old emails where Brock discussed selling some of my jewelry, proving he had knowingly stolen and sold my possessions. She also had recordings of phone calls where he promised to leave his controlling ex-wife, me, and move to Sacramento, showing his intent to abandon our family. The most significant development came when Brock's family finally stopped defending him. After I confronted his mother with proof of his first marriage and the court records showing his history of fraud, she broke down. She admitted that the family had known about Alexandra but convinced themselves that Brock had changed. They helped him hide his past because they believed he deserved a fresh start. His mother tried to apologize, claiming they never thought he would repeat the same patterns with me. But I couldn't accept her apology. They watched me fall in love with him, marry him, and have children with him, all while knowing his history of deception and fraud. They kept quiet as he stole from me and planned to abandon our daughters, just as they had stayed silent when he did the same to Alexandra. The police investigation into the financial fraud is progressing. They found evidence that Brock has been selling stolen items through various online marketplaces. He's also been investigated for potential insurance fraud related to some of my lost jewelry. His professional life is falling apart too. His company suspended him after learning about the criminal investigation. Through all of this, my daughters remain my primary concern. They still ask about their father, but less frequently now. I've started taking them to a child psychologist who specializes in parental abandonment. It's expensive, but watching them slowly heal is worth every penny. Update 3: The divorce is nearly finalized, and the judge's ruling exceeded our expectations. After reviewing the evidence of Brock's pattern of deception, financial fraud, and abandonment, the judge awarded me full custody of our daughters. Brock's visitation rights are limited to supervised visits twice a month, contingent on him completing a psychiatric evaluation and financial responsibility course. Given his current behavior, I doubt he'll fulfill either requirement. The financial settlement was substantial. Brock is required to repay every penny he stole, including the money from our daughter's college fund, with interest. The judge also ordered him to pay additional compensation for emotional damages and legal fees. His attempt to claim partial ownership of my inheritance from my grandmother was rejected outright when we proved he had forged documents to access those funds. Kathy gave birth last month to a healthy baby boy. She named him Lucas and is doing well in Oregon. Her parents' support has been invaluable during this difficult time. She started taking online classes to complete her degree in early childhood education, determined to build a stable future for her son. Despite our unusual connection, we've maintained contact and developed an unexpected friendship. She sends me updates about Lucas and her new life, and I'm genuinely happy that she's found peace away from Brock's chaos. Surprisingly, she's met someone new, a local teacher who knows her full story and accepts her situation. He's been wonderfully supportive of her and Lucas. It's heartening to see her rebuild her life after everything Brock put her through. She's also helping with the ongoing criminal investigation into Brock's financial crimes, providing additional evidence as she discovers it. Alexandra, Brock's first wife, has become an unexpected source of support. After our initial contact through Maria, she's been helping me navigate the legal system and sharing insights from her own experience with Brock's manipulation tactics. She's now happily remarried and living in California, but the trauma of her marriage to Brock had lasting effects on her life. She had to rebuild her credit and financial stability from scratch, just as I'm doing now. I've completely cut contact with Brock's family. Their recent attempts at reconciliation feel hollow after learning they knowingly let him deceive another woman after Alexandra. His mother still occasionally tries to reach out through mutual friends, claiming she wants to maintain a relationship with her granddaughters. But I can't trust people who enabled his behavior not once, but twice. Emma and Sophie are adapting better than I expected. The therapy is helping them process their feelings about their father's absence. They still have difficult days, especially when they see their friends with their dads, but they're showing remarkable resilience. Their grades have improved, and they've started making new friends at school. The child psychologist says their progress is exceptional given the circumstances. Brock hasn't made any real effort to see the girls since the supervised visitation order was implemented. He canceled the first scheduled visit, claiming work commitments, and hasn't attempted to reschedule. His child support payments for both our daughters and Lucas are already behind, leading to additional legal proceedings. The last I heard, he's been staying with a friend since losing his job and apartment. As for me, I'm focusing on rebuilding our lives. I've sold our house, too many painful memories, and bought a smaller but cozier home closer to my parents. I've returned to full-time work at the pediatric clinic, and my colleagues have been incredibly supportive. The girls love their new school, and we're slowly developing new routines and traditions as a family of 3. Sometimes I catch myself wondering how I missed the signs, how I let myself be deceived for so long. But then I remember that Brock didn't just fool me, he fooled everyone around him. He's a skilled manipulator who had years of practice perfecting his deception. The best revenge isn't dwelling on the past but moving forward and creating a better life for my daughters and myself. That's exactly what we're doing, one day at a time.